Two things can be true about Matt McLain and his willingness to play wherever Terry Francona needs him to.
You are Locked On Reds, your daily Cincinnati Reds podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On Reds. My name is Jeff Carr, and I'm glad that you're alongside me today. I've loved this Reds team since birth. Seriously, I've got the baby pictures to prove it. And this is my sixth season, now my seventh off season, hosting the Locked On Reds podcast and talking about your Cincinnati Reds every single day because we are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every single day. And look, Locked On Reds is for everyone. I want to make everything digestible, and we're going to talk about the biggest thing going on in Reds country. We will dive into some geeky stats, but I'm going to make them make sense, because if they don't make sense to me, then I'm not going to try and make sense to you. And we're going to really just overreact to everything that goes on this offseason as we get ready for a playoff year in 2025. I'm believing it. I am believing it, and I hope you are too. But I'm glad that you're alongside me, because on today's podcast, we have an important performance for the Reds that happened in Arizona last night, and we're going to dissect that later on in today's podcast. Also, Nick Krall said a few things, and I disagree with them when it comes to the direction of the lineup for 2025. I'll tell you why in just a few minutes. But I want to start with the business of moving Matt McLain around and why there are two truths about that. That's all coming up on today's podcast that is brought to you by FanDuel. You can start the season with a big return over on FanDuel. Place your first $5 bet and you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets, guaranteed. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. And where we will get started today is with Matt McLain, because look, it's great that Matt McLain wants to move if he is asked, but he shouldn't be asked. Let me kind of talk through this a little bit, because it was reported the other day by Charlie Goldsmith from the Cincinnati Enquirer that Matt McLain is willing to move to third base or to center field if the need should arise. He played center field in college. I think he did for like a minute or two in the minor leagues, but they were at the lower levels. Nothing really as he was, making his way through the top ends of the minor leagues. And he didn't really play third base either, but he's an athlete. I'm not going to put it past him to say that he can't do that. But I don't think that he should have to, for a couple of different reasons. Yesterday, I made a comparison on the podcast to his willingness to move and comparing it to Pete Rose's willingness to move back during the Big Red Machine era. Pete was willing to play whatever position that Sparky Anderson needed him to play so that the team could succeed. I love that mentality from Matt McLain, but he is not in the same spot in his career that Pete was whenever he did that. Pete was well established, and he did not have to worry about getting back into the swing of the major leagues, because Matt McLain has really only played 1 year, and it hasn't even been 162 games. And he missed all of this past season, so he doesn't have a full 162 under his belt, to say nothing of multiple years under his belt. So he is really just getting acclimated to Major League Baseball. So there's the part of it where it's like development is still very much a part of what we talk about with Matt McLain in 2025. He's not a finished product as a player. But also consider this, and I want to do one of my favorite things. Everydayers know I love blind comparisons. So we're going to throw up a couple of stats here. Let's talk about this, because player A in 2023 had a batting average of .290, an on-base percentage of .357, so he got on base a little over 35% of the time, a slugging percentage of .507. That's pretty nice. He had a wins above replacement of 3.7, so he was inching close to all-star level talent when it came to WAR. And as far as a defensive stat goes, at the second base position in 296 innings, he had exactly 0 defensive runs saved. So that meant that he was perfectly average. He was not detrimental. He wasn't necessarily amazing, but he wasn't a problem at second base. That's in 2023. Player B in 2024 had a batting average of .248. Had an on-base percentage of .357, the exact same as player A. Slugging percentage of .392. And he had wins above replacement of 1.7, a full 2 WAR less than player A. And on the defensive side, the defensive runs saved at second base in 1,137 innings in 2024, he had -10 defensive runs saved. So according to that metric, he wasn't really that great. Who are we talking about here? Player A is Matt McLain. And player B is Jonathan India. You're picking player A. Let's be objective about it. All of those statistics, except for the on-base percentage, player A was better than. Matt McLain in 2023 was better than Jonathan India. Now, Jonathan India did play more total games in 2024 than did Matt McLain in 2023, but all of the other numbers point to Matt McLain having been better, especially when you talk about the fact, and we'll talk about this here in a little bit, why power is such a key thing with these two guys. Matt McLain has it, Jonathan India doesn't. And as much as we loved the kind of resurgence that Jonathan India had in 2024, if somebody's moving next year for Terry Francona, it should be Jonathan India. Because Matt McLain has proven on every scale, whether it be hitting, defense, base running, all of the things, that he is better. He definitely has more upside in his career than does Jonathan India. We know who Jonathan India is at this point. I have been very lauding. I can't think of the word. I've loved Jonathan India's season in 2024, but quite frankly, when you compare it apples to apples with Matt McLain in 2023, there is no comparison. Matt McLain had a better year. And so if we get that, if we get something like that, because I understand that if we compared Spencer Steers 2024 to Spencer Steers 2023, he was worse in 2024. So I get it. There's a sophomore slump effect, and there's something that Matt McLain's going to have to go through as far as adjustments and getting healthy again and getting comfortable again. So we may not see those exact numbers, but I still believe that Matt McLain has a much higher ceiling than does Jonathan India. And I think that McLain should be encouraged in that. And by that meaning, he should not be moved around while he is still getting acclimated to the major league game, while he's still getting back. I mean, think about, Tyler Stevenson went through the whole thing with his broken collarbone, and he had it surgically repaired, and he was ready to play in 2023. Didn't really deal with a lot of injuries in 2023, but he just wasn't that good. Then he kind of bounced back a lot this year. Are we going to see something like that from Matt McLain? Probably. But also consider the fact that Tyler Stevenson, on top of coming back from that surgery and the broken collarbone, was asked to add first base to his regimen for the season. It didn't work. There was no angle that you could have looked at that and said that worked for him. So are we really going to move Matt McLain around with this? Are we really going to ask him to add more to his plate where there's already quite a lot? And there's going to be conversations, and I know that Steve is not looking forward to this when we have this, but we're going to have this conversation of, can he actually stay healthy? Because when he was called up in May of 2023, he did not play from May through the end of the year. Remember, he spent the last, I believe it was, month and a half on the injured list. And then, of course, he spent all of 2024 on the injured list. So what does that look like for him in the future? But I say all this to say that, I think two things are true with this. I love his enthusiasm, and I love his leadership ability to be like, look, I'll do whatever you need me to do. But he should not be asked to do whatever they need him to do. He should play second base in 2025. These playoffs, if you've been watching any of the games and stuff, are proving that power changes the game. The Reds shouldn't shun that, even though it seems like Nick Krall is going to. The best way to enhance your football watching experience, with football going on, college football going on, basketball is getting going, hockey's going on, Prize Picks is the way to do that. And Prize Picks is America's #1 daily fantasy sports app because they've got so many different ways for you to win. Seriously, all you need is, in some cases, 4 picks in an entry, and you can win up to 100 times your money. It's that easy because all you have to do is pick your favorite players, like, I don't know, maybe you're a Bengals fan, you go in, you pick Joe Burrow, you pick more on his passing yards because he's been hitting more on his passing yards all year long. And then you put that as part of your entry. All you need is 3 more picks, and you could be winning big. Plus, they've got a great promo right now. If you use the promo code LOCKEDONMLB, then when you play $5, your first $5 play gets you $50 instantly. You don't even have to win. That's how easy it is. So download the Prize Picks app today and use that code LOCKEDONMLB. You'll get $50 instantly when you play $5. Prize Picks. Run your game. This episode of Locked On Reds is also brought to you by Booking.com. Yeah. Are you like me and enjoy traveling during the off-season? Well, then be like me and book your next trip with Booking.com. They've got hotels, bed and breakfast, vacation rentals, resorts, and so much more. And it's so easy to book over at Booking.com because all you have to do is look up your destination, maybe even look up a landmark or someplace that you're going to, like maybe say a stadium or something like that, and you'll be able to find the best accommodations, the closest to that stadium that you can find. I was able to do this whenever I went to Atlanta, and there's so many other great places to check out with it because they've got hotels that even look over stadiums. They've got family-friendly resorts, and so much more. Booking.com has so many choices across the U.S. for your off-season travel. The right stay can make you a fan of any U.S. city. Book today on Booking.com on the site or on the Booking.com app. We are talking Reds here today and every day, every week, all month long, all year long, off-season, in-season, preseason, all the seasons. Make sure that you subscribe because I'll give you 30 minutes or more of Reds Talk in your feed every single day. And we talked a little bit about Matt McLain and why I don't think he should move next season. There were some comments. Nick Krall spoke to the media. Really, it was around the firing of the 3 hitting coaches, as we discussed on yesterday's episode, Steve and I did. The triumvirate of hitting, as it were. Yeah, no, I didn't use it then, and I tried to use it there, and that didn't work. But Joel McKeithen, Terry Bradshaw, and I am blanking on the last guy's name, Tim Lamontagne, I think. Anyway, they were let go. So the Reds are looking for a new direction with their lineup next season, and Nick Krall spoke on that direction and what he wants the lineup to look like next year, but his comments left a lot to be desired. Here's what he had to say. I'll read the quote that was in the Inquirer article written by Gordon Wittenmeyer. He said this: "We need to make more contact, take better at-bats, and you want line drive hitters in this ballpark because line drives are going to go out of this ballpark," he said. So you want hitters and an approach where you can use the whole field and hit line drives and take good at-bats. That's more important to us than power, especially in this ballpark. I don't know that Nick Krall is watching the playoffs because look, power is changing the game. Giancarlo Stanton has not had a good season. If you ask our friends over at Locked On Yankees, Stacey Gotsulias and Brian McKeon, they would tell you Giancarlo Stanton has not had a good playoffs, but Giancarlo Stanton won them the game yesterday. They were tied late 2-2 with the Royals in Kansas City. Series tied 1 apiece. Not wanting to get their backs against the wall on the road, and Giancarlo Stanton uncorks a solo shot. That's all it took. They won 3-2. Because when you have good pitching, 3 or 4 runs could be the difference. You get 3 or 4 runs, you could probably win with good pitching. And the Reds are pretty close to that. I mean, starting pitching was good last year. Bullpen was a little erratic, but for the most part was pretty good. So you don't need a ton of runs, and you don't need a ton of hits. You just need a couple of impactful ones. We saw it when the Royals came to town. The Royals hit a ton of homers off the Reds pitching. The A's hit a ton of homers off of Reds pitching. The Tigers hit a ton of homers off of Reds pitching. Now, the A's, obviously not in the playoffs, but the Royals and the Tigers are. And the Guardians hit home runs. They're in the playoffs right now. It's home runs that change the game. And I think that when you're talking about what he is looking at, is he talking about selling out for power? Because if he's talking about selling out for power, I think we all know that that's not good. But to shun players with a better profile, a penchant for power, if you would, like an Anthony Santander, in favor of a contact first player like Jurickson Profar, that just wouldn't help this team. I talked in the last segment about Jonathan India and how I think we know who he is. He's a guy who gets on base and he slaps the ball all over the field. Kind of does what Nick Krall was talking about, but he doesn't do it for a whole lot of power. He slugged under 400 last year. He slugged not great for the last couple of years. Really, his rookie season was the only time that he ever showed power. And that's not the profile that this team needs more of. This team needs more of guys that are going to smash dingers, right? Hit dingers, not singles. I know the guy said hit dingers and don't bunt or whatever it was. But this team should lead the majors in homers, or at least be like top 3 in homers every single year. For them to not be, and I know that they aren't, and we're going to dive deep into more performance-based stuff here soon, but they weren't there. They were very low on the homer list, and that should not be the case in this ballpark. But the other part of that equation was, and Nick Krall said, when it comes to this ballpark, line drives turn into home runs. Well, what happens when you don't play in this ballpark? The Yankees are actually pretty good away from their little bandbox, right? Everybody in the American League East complains to no end about the Yankees ballpark. I'm pretty sure everybody in the NL Central complains to no end about Great American Ballpark too. But they haven't complained as much in recent years because the Reds haven't had that much power. So they're not that worried about it. The Reds have been out-homered. I remember doing this episode about a week or so, probably a week or 2 weeks ago or something like that. But I was looking at some concerning statistics about the Reds at home. They've been out-homered. They allow more home runs than they hit. That should not happen. And for that to continue to be the case is just silly. It's not an indictment on pitching. Honestly, the Reds as a pitching staff were pretty decent at limiting home runs this year. It's the fact that they're not hitting them. It's about the lineup. The lineup needs power. And while I'm not saying rebuild the lineup for all power, all gas, no brake, just go get the one big guy you can put in the middle of your lineup. And could it be CES? Maybe, but I want there to be an established guy that the Reds can rely on until we figure that out about CES. Because CES has the chance to be that middle of the order, big bopper, 40 homer guy. But there's going to be guys on the free agent list that can do that now, and we don't have to wait. Teoscar Hernandez is going to be there. Now, there's a chance the Dodgers bring him back. That could happen. But he is going to become an unrestricted free agent after the World Series is over. And then you look at guys like Anthony Santander. He's going to be out there. And I really think that Nick Krall was answering like our take about going out and getting a power outfielder. There's other people that are talking about that. We are not the only ones. Look, I'm not by any chance saying that Locked On Reds is the only people talking about power in the Reds lineup in 2025. I know a lot of people are. So the fact that Nick Krall is saying that, it does feel like it's an answer to some of those thoughts. And look, I do concede that a power hitter is expensive. So, I don't know, maybe Nick Krall is trying to prepare us for the inevitable. But look, I'm going to stay, I'm still going to say, go for the power bat this offseason. They should be able to. By all intents and purposes, I believe that they will have the payroll flexibility to do that, and they should. And hey, you know what? Power can cover up mistakes on the base paths too. Don't want there to be mistakes on the base path. I'm not saying that I want that. But if it happens, you know what's good? When the next guy hits a home run. Reds need that power, man. They need that power. But let's change gears a little bit because there was an important performance for the Reds that happened in the Arizona Fall League last night. There is a great promotion to take advantage of over at FanDuel as NFL season is underway and college football, basketball, hockey, all the sports are going on right now. Plus, of course, Major League Baseball playoffs, because you can get $200, period. You don't even have to win when you put in a $5 bet. That's over at FanDuel. All you have to do is go to FanDuel.com/lockedon right now. And I'd probably take that $5 and I'd be looking at this Yankees-Royals game. Look, I get it. We all love to hate on the Yankees. Nobody wants to root for the Yankees, but Garrett Cole is going, and the Yankees have a chance to clinch a spot in the ALCS. You best believe they ain't gonna miss, and I don't think they will. Their money line is -156. I think I'm throwing $5 on that. And look, if you download the app today and create your account over at FanDuel.com/lockedon, throw that $5 on there. You're going to get $200 whether you win or you lose. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon. Download America's #1 sportsbook today. Make sure to take us with you when you can't watch us on YouTube. We're on every podcast app out there. Seriously, subscribe. We're on every platform, and we are always free. So make sure you subscribe. All right, I want to finish up today's episode. The Arizona Fall League kicked off actually a couple of days ago. Not yesterday, but on Tuesday. Sorry, lost track of what day it is. And took off with some great stuff. CES hit a double. Matt McLain had a couple of hits and a homer. Even Tyler Callahan got in on the hits action. He got a hit in there. Matt McLain was replaced in the game by Sean McLain, his younger brother. So that was kind of fun because baseball. But in the second game of the season, none of those guys played. But Connor Phillips did. Connor Phillips, you might remember, we talked about him a little bit this season because we saw him at the end of 2023, and we immediately inserted him into the depth chart and said, yes, this is a guy that can really help with the pitching depth for this team. He's probably not going to make the rotation out of spring training, but we should see him at some point, and he should provide some good innings. Never happened, though, because he was bad. I mean, real bad in 2024. And the Reds need him to figure it out because their pitching depth is being tested for 2025 already. And they really need Connor Phillips to reemerge as someone who they can count on. He started off pretty nicely, though, on Wednesday night because his first start in the Arizona Fall League, he threw 4 shutout innings. He allowed just 2 hits, and he had 7 strikeouts. But the number one statistic, no walks. Not one. You love to see that because that was a big problem for him in 2024. And look, as much as I want him to be part of the Reds' depth process, like I think that he's going to be a guy that should be expected. I would say that if we're sitting here in May and hopefully we're not dealing with a lot of pitching injuries in 2025, God forbid if we find ourselves in another spot where every single person on the starting rotation on opening day is either hurt or traded. Don't want to see that again. But there's an injury that happens. Let's be realistic, optimistic. Let's marry the two ideas and say first pitching injury happens in May. I want Connor Phillips to be one of the first guys that we think of to get that call up. There's not going to be Brandon Williamson. He's got Tommy John. There's not going to be Julian Aguiar. He's getting Tommy John. I think Graham Ashcraft's going to the bullpen next year. So those are 3 big dudes that should have been part of this equation that won't be. And I think that we will see guys like Connor Phillips really get an opportunity because sure, Chase Petty and Chase Burns could be ready. Rhett Lauder, I think, will already be here. I think Rhett Lauder wins a rotation spot out of spring training. So who's that leave? Rhett Lauder. Lyon Richardson got pushed to the bullpen in AAA last year. And if you're getting kicked out of the starting rotation in Louisville, I don't think they're going to put you back into the starting rotation in Cincinnati. So I think we can kind of count him out of the starting pitching depth. Carson Spires pitched a lot last year. Out of the rotation, out of the bullpen. I think we know who he is. I'd rather see him out of the bullpen if I got to see him at all. So Connor Phillips has a big opportunity here. He could vault up the list to maybe even like the sixth guy on the depth chart, the sixth starter, first guy to get the call from Louisville. That's his opportunity. He's not going to prove it this fall, though. He's got to do some work. It started with a good start on Wednesday night, but it's going to be, does he pitch well in Arizona? Cool. Does he pitch well in spring training? Cool. Does he go to Louisville and maybe has a good month of April? Cool. Then we can talk. Because last year, let me put into perspective for you just how bad Connor Phillips 2024 was. Every single negative stat that a pitcher can have, it went from where it was in 2023 to worse in 2024. He allowed more walks. He allowed more homers. He had a higher batting average against. He had a higher ERA, a higher fielding independent pitching, FIP, higher xFIP, all of that in AAA. It was all higher. It's all worse in AAA in 2024 than it was in 2023. So the fact that happened, the Reds did not have any interest in bringing him up. In fact, they sent him to Goodyear. And it wasn't because he was rehabbing an injury, but it was because he had to go back to working on his fundamentals, working on his mechanics, working on just fundamental pitching. He was basically, I don't know if you truly hit the reset button, but that's kind of the metaphor that I'm getting here when I think of this. And if he's going to be part of the pitching depth for 2025, he's got to prove it in a bunch of different ways, but this was a good start. This is why it's important. I don't want to say that I'm looking at this 4-inning start in Arizona for the Fall League and saying, boom, put him back on the depth chart. You can count on him. But this is a good start because he's got the stuff, man. Every scout that's watched him, any broadcaster, any writer, anybody that saw him in the minor leagues said that this dude's got the stuff. It's just, can he locate it? Can he put it where it needs to be? Or is it going to go wild on him? Because if you look at his minor league statistics, it has gone wild on him more times than not. In 2023, he was really vaulted to the majors by just an absolutely stellar showing in Double-A. He pitched really well in Chattanooga in 2023. He pitched a little bit in Louisville in 2023. Wasn't all that great, but the Reds were like, let's give him a shot. And if it weren't for his last start, which was a huge blow up and he didn't get an out, his stats might not have been as horrible as they were, but we weren't seeing the kind of numbers that were like, yeah, we need to see that on opening day. Nah, we didn't feel that way. But in 2024, his stats just took such a nosedive that he wasn't even on the radar. Can he get back on the radar? He started out well in that regard on Wednesday night. No other Reds that are in the Arizona Fall League got into that game. I looked at the box score, and you can watch the games on MLB.com, but it's really hard to find. You had to dig through them. I asked a friend of the show, Doug Gray over at RedsMinorLeagues.com, how does he watch them? And he sent me a quicker link to kind of cut through all the looking down the list and stuff. But no other Reds got in the game. Sean McLain did start, and it was funny because when I saw the box score, I saw McLain at third base. I'm like, oh, they're already putting him there. But it was Sean McLain, not Matt McLain. So false alarm there. But yeah, decent start for Connor Phillips. Let's see what else he's got. But that is where we will end today's Locked On Reds podcast. Thank you so much for joining me on today's show. Coming up on the next Locked On Reds podcast, we're going to begin our look back and kind of give an autopsy on the year. It feels like coaching hires and news and things like that is going to slow down now because the Reds made the big move. They're not going to set the budget until later on this month. So let's look back. Let's have an autopsy on the 2024 season, and we'll begin tomorrow. So make sure you check it out. Thanks as always for making Locked On Reds your first listen every day. Now make Locked On MLB your second listen. Got a link in the description of today's episode. Sully's going to have you covered on the MLB playoffs and so much more every single day. So make sure you check out Locked On MLB for that second listen. But until tomorrow, and, as for Locked On MLB is concerned, Locked On Reds, we are all part of the Locked On Podcast Network. We are your team every single day, and we will be Locked On Reds every single day.